What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to The Common Coder. My name is Josh, and in this video, I'm going to be giving you an overview of Microsoft's Visual Studio Code. So Visual Studio Code is a lightweight but powerful code editor from Microsoft, and in this video, we're going to explore how to use it for web development. So we're going to talk about how to open files and folders. We're going to explore the various sidebar panels. We'll talk about extensions and how to add functionality to Visual Studio Code. And finally, we'll explore the search bar, the command palette, and the settings, so that way you can customize Visual Studio Code and really make it your own. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the first thing that we want to do to work with Visual Studio Code is go ahead and launch it. So here on a Mac, I'm going to go ahead and click into my Launchpad, find Visual Studio Code, go ahead and click on it to open it. Now, if you're on Windows, it'd be the same thing. You click on your Start menu, find it in your Start menu, and then go ahead and launch it from there. Now, if you don't have Visual Studio Code installed, I have another video on how to download and install it. So go ahead and check that out and then jump back to this video to go ahead and learn how to use it. So what we're going to go ahead and do is first look at how to open a file. So to open a file, all I have to do is go up here to the File menu and click Open. And you can see here on my machine, I'm going to go ahead and click into this folder that I have called Code. This is where I keep all my projects. I have one here called vscode overview. So I'm going to click on that. And then I'm going to go ahead and click the index.html file and click Open. And you can see that Visual Studio Code recognizes this as an HTML file. So it gives me some nice syntax highlighting here. Also tells me the language mode of the file, which is HTML down here at the bottom. So Visual Studio Code is a text editor. You can edit files of text in the editor. However, the real power of Visual Studio Code comes from working with folders. Okay, so most web projects you're going to work with, web applications, they're going to be either one or a series of folders. And Visual Studio Code gives us a nice way of working with the files that are within those folders. So let's go ahead and check that out. So I have this index file here. This is actually part of that VS Code overview folder. So let's go ahead and see how we can open the folder itself. So I'm going to go ahead and close this, and then again, go ahead and click on the open button, or I can do file and then click open folder. So I'm going to go ahead and just click this one right here so we can see that they basically do the same thing. And here I am again. You can see there's that code folder that's on my machine. Here's the VS Code overview. So if I wanted to work on this project here, I could select the folder and then go ahead and click open. And when I do that, now the whole folder is open in Visual Studio Code, and I can see all of the files within that folder. So this is essentially one project, and I can work with all of the various files inside of this project right here inside of Visual Studio Code. So for example, if I wanted to look at the contact file, you can go ahead and open that up, and you can see there's the contact file. If I open the about, you can see there is the about file, and I can even have multiple files open at the same time. So if I basically double click each one of these, now you can see here is my index file, here's my contact file, and here's my about file. And I can work with these files. So for example, let's just say if I wanted to go to my index and change this from this is the home page, I can go ahead and change this to welcome to my website. And then we'll change this to an exclamation point. Visual Studio Code is pretty cool. It tells you basically that this file has unsaved changes. And you can tell that by looking up here at the tab with the file name. And if you ever see this little dot here, that means that this file has unsaved changes. So I can go ahead and save this by hitting Command S or Control S on Windows. You can also do File, and then there's a Save and a Save All. So if you had been editing multiple files, so for example, I make some edits here and some edits here and some edits here, I can go ahead and go up to File and then click Save All, and that will save all of the files. You notice there's a keyboard shortcut for that as well, which is going to be Option Command S. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and undo these changes and then go ahead and use that keyboard shortcut, Option Command S, and then that saved all of my files. All right, now once you're done with a folder, you can go ahead and close these individual files if you want to. And so when you're done with your project, you can go ahead and close the folder. So in order to close the folder, all you have to do is go up to the File menu up here on the top, go ahead and click File, and then click Close Folder. All right, and that will basically bring us back to the Visual Studio Code welcome page. All right, there is one more way we can open Visual Studio Code, and that is from the command line. So what we can do is go into the terminal, and terminal will usually start out on your user directory on your machine. So whatever user that you're logged in as. So you can see here it says the common coder, which is the username I'm logged in as. And if I do a list command here to list out the directories, you can see that there is that code folder along with my desktop, documents, downloads, library, movies, pictures, etc., etc. So what I want to do is go ahead and go into the code folder. So I'll go ahead and type cd code to change my directory into that code directory. And then from here, I can run the list command again, and I can see that there is my Visual Studio Code. So this is vscode overview. Just a note, if you're using a Windows machine and it's telling you that ls is not a command, you can use the dir command, dir, to list out the contents of that directory. Once I find the folder that I want to open, I can go ahead and cd into that directory and say cd vscode overview. And then from here, I can actually type code, which is going to invoke Visual Studio Code from the command line, and then dot, meaning I want to open the current directory. So if I say code dot, hit enter, and it's telling me command not found. So if you run into this command not found, it's because you need to install the code command in the computer's path. So it basically knows where to find Visual Studio Code. So it's pretty easy. Visual Studio Code gives you an easy way to do that. So if you open VS Code, and then if you go up to the view option and then click command palette, if you start typing code, inside of here, there will be an option for shell command, install code command in path. And so what this will do is it will install that code command, basically make a mapping of that code command to the Visual Studio Code application, and it will link those things together. Go ahead and click OK. You might need to provide your password here. And if it's successful, it'll say shell command code successfully installed in path. Now, if you're in Windows, depending on the version you downloaded, this might work, or you might have to manually add the code command into your path, which is outside of the scope of this video. But if you're curious, if you would like me to make a video about that, leave a comment down below and I will gladly make a video showing you how to do that. All right, with that out of the way, if we go back to our terminal now, let me go ahead and close VS Code. I'm going to go ahead and close the terminal because in order for that code command to take effect, I have to relaunch my terminal. So I'm going to go ahead and relaunch it, navigate back to my code directory / VS Code overview. And then from here now I can type code dot, and that will open that directory inside of Visual Studio Code. All right, so now that we have a folder open in Visual Studio Code, next thing that we're going to do is look at some of the panels. So over here on the left, we have a sidebar, and in this sidebar there are various panels that you can open. So we've actually been looking at the Explorer panel. I'll go ahead and make this a little bit bigger so we can see it a little bit better. Much better. All right, so we've been looking at the Explorer panel, which is this top one here that looks like the file. So you can see I can expand and collapse this Explorer panel, and this shows me all of the files and folders that are inside of my currently open project. Okay, so I currently have that VS Code overview folder open, and I can see everything inside, and if I had subfolders and stuff I can see in here. I can also add files and directories. So using this, I can add another file. Let's maybe call this links.html. And then maybe I wanted to add a folder, so I can click the add folder button, and maybe I wanted a folder for some images that I have. So I can say images, and I can keep my images inside of this folder. And it's actively adding these to my file system on my machine. All right, so if I go ahead and open my Finder and then click on my home directory, which is right here, Common Coder, open that code folder, open VS Code overview, and you can see that even though I added those files and folders inside of Visual Studio Code, they appear right here inside of my file system. A couple other things that we have up here at the top, we have a refresh button. So there are files being added from other places. So maybe if I added one from the terminal or added one from the Finder, I could refresh and see that updated listing of files. And then finally, we have this collapse all. So if you had a bunch of nested folders and stuff in here, using this collapse all would collapse all of the folders down. You see the little caret went down. So just for the fun of it, let's go ahead and create a file in here. It's not going to be real. We'll just call it test.jpg. We'll pretend it's an image. So imagine I had a bunch of images in here and I had some other folders and files and I wanted to collapse them all. Using this button right here, that will collapse all of the folders that exist inside of my project and basically take me out to the top level where then I can drill down into my files again. So very useful for larger projects once you start having multiple folders and multiple files. Kind of hard to see here with a small subset, but it's a very powerful feature for keeping your workspace organized. All right, so let's go ahead and close all of the open files, and we can do that by right-clicking on any of the open tabs here and clicking Close All. You can see we also have some other options. I can close just the saved ones, I can close the ones right to the file that I clicked on. I can close all other files other than the one that I clicked on, or I can close that specific one. So we have a lot of different options here as far as closing. I'm gonna go ahead and click close all. All right, so the next thing that we're gonna look at is the search panel. So if I go ahead and click on search, you can see this search box pop up, and there's even an option for replacing. I'm going to go ahead and just minimize that for now. This search is a global search. And so what it will do is it will search all of the files, all of the folders inside of your current project for text in the file that matches what you're looking for. So for example, if I start typing this is, you can see that inside of my about.html, I have an H1 that says this is the about page. And I also have a contact HTML. The H1 says this is the contact page. So this is very, very powerful tool for searching through large projects to find the information that you need. I can also match the case of my search. So if I click this here, it would only look for this is. So if I click that, you can see now there's no results found. And if I use this option here, this will match the whole word. So if I click on this, you'll notice nothing actually happens down here in my search results because it's matching the words this and is. Okay, so it's looking at the contents of the text inside of my files, and it sees, okay, there's a word here, this, and a word here is. Now, if I was to change this to this I, you can see that there's no results found because I don't have anything in my files that matches this I as whole words. The I is part of a separate word, and so that doesn't show up in the search result. So it's a pretty powerful tool to go ahead and search through your files. This last item here is what's known as a regular expression search. So this is all about pattern matching. This is well beyond the scope of this video. So the use case here, let's just say you were looking for something in your project that looked like a phone number. You can do a regular expression to match what a phone number is supposed to look like. So, you have your area code plus your 3 digits plus your 4 digits separated by hyphens. You could write a regular expression that will look for those patterns and it will find those inside of your code. So it's pretty cool, but like I said, beyond the scope of this video. Another thing that we can do is replace. So for example, if I wanted to change all of the instances of this is and change them to this isn't, you can see down here in my files, you can see this is the change that's going to take place. It's going to remove this is and replace it with this isn't. And if I click this button here, it's going to go ahead and replace all of those occurrences. So replace 2 occurrences across 2 files with this isn't. Now this is a destructive change, so it's going to make the change and save the files. So really want to make sure that is exactly what you want to do, because you're not going to be able to revert those changes unless you're using some kind of source control. So if we go back to our files and I open my about, you can see that now it says this isn't the about page. So obviously this isn't what I want. So I'm going to go back to my search panel, go ahead and search for this isn't this time, and replace this back with this is with a capital T. Let's go ahead and hit replace all again. It's going to say replace 2 occurrences across 2 files with this is, and I'll go ahead and hit replace, and now I'm back where I started. The next panel that we're going to look at is the source control panel. So this is actually out of scope for this video, but if you're familiar with Git, Visual Studio Code has a Git integration, and it will allow you to work with various Git features right inside of Visual Studio Code. So you can manage your changes, you can do your commits, put your commit messages, all things like that. So like I said, out of scope for this video, but we are going to do a series on how to use Git. So if you're excited for that, I would recommend hitting the subscribe button and clicking the notification bell, so that way you get notified when we upload new videos. All right, so similarly, the next panel on the sidebar is the run and debug panel. So this one is also out of scope for this video, but we will be looking at this a lot more when we get to JavaScript. So basically what it is, it's a debugging tool that allows you to step through and see your code executing one line at a time. And you can use this for JavaScript, and you can actually use it for pretty much any language that Visual Studio Code supports. You just have to configure it for the language that you're using. So, and you can see here, if I just click run and debug, nothing really is going to happen, but it tells me to select a debugger. So by default, we have a Node.js debugger installed. I can actually debug a web app in Chrome, so I can actually get some Chrome feedback inside of Visual Studio Code and debug from there. I can also use Edge, which is Microsoft's browser, very similar to Chrome in most ways. The last panel here on the bottom is something called the extensions panel, and this is how we can get additional functionality inside of Visual Studio Code. So you can see here that when I click on that panel, it starts to load in various popular extensions. So these aren't being installed, but these are basically options for me to browse through. So you can see that Python shows up here. This is an official extension from Microsoft, so it gives Python language support. You can also see here, so for C++, if you're a C or C++ developer, Jupyter Notebooks, very popular in the Python community, Live Server, which is something that we'll look at when we get back to looking at some HTML, all kinds of different things in here. And you can see that some of these extensions are officially from Microsoft, and some of them are from third parties. So for example, if I scroll down, you can see that if you're a Vue developer, for example, and you want to use Viter, I think that's how you say that, Viter, I think it's Viter. Anyways, you can see that the developer for this, someone named Pine Wu. Same thing, if we go down a little bit more, you can see that there's an extension for kind of a GitHub looking theme. This is from GitHub, which is a little redundant because GitHub's owned by Microsoft, but you get the idea. So they can either be official extensions published by Microsoft or extensions published by third parties. So in a future video, we're actually going to go through and talk about a bunch of extensions that you might want to download and install for working with Visual Studio Code as a web developer. So again, if you want to check that out, I recommend hitting the subscribe button and clicking the notification bell to be notified when those videos come out. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click on the File Explorer menu one more time. And now we're going to go ahead and look at the Visual Studio Code integrated terminal. So the easiest way to get to this is to go up to your menu, click on Terminal, and then click New Terminal. And you can see that there is a keyboard shortcut for this, but go ahead and click that, and it will open a terminal right here in Visual Studio Code. And you can actually use different types of terminals. So the default one that comes with Mac OS X is now Z Shell. And you can see that that is the terminal that opened up, which is very similar to the terminal that I was using when I launched Visual Studio Code. It's actually identical since it's the same shell. But what's cool here is I can actually run terminal commands against this directory that I'm already inside. And this is super powerful because when we get to working with projects and launching servers and running commands, it's nice to have the terminal integrated in the development environment. That way you don't have to have multiple windows open. So for example, let's just say, I'm command line savvy, and rather than using buttons to create my files, I want to use the terminal instead. So let's pretend my site was going to have some JavaScript on it and I wanted to create a directory with a JavaScript file. I can go ahead and say make directory, and we'll call it scripts. And you can see that the scripts directory was created. And then I can even cd into that directory and say cd scripts. And then in here, I can say touch.js. And you can see inside of the scripts folder, I now have a scripts.js file. Okay, so I can use this command line and work with the command line inside of Visual Studio Code without having to have a separate editor, floating around and jumping back and forth between windows. If you ever want to close the terminal, you can always close it out. So I can go ahead and click close. Same thing, I can go back up to the top and click new terminal. And notice when I click close, it actually kept my previous one open. And this is pretty cool because it allows you to have multiple terminals open within the same window. So this is very common when you start to have different layers of your project. So if you have like a front end and you want to work with terminal commands just for the front end, and then you also need to run one to start your server on the back end, you can have separate terminals open here in the side panel. So I can create another one and another one and another one, and I can run different commands inside of each one of these terminals. And then when I'm done with them, all I have to do, click the little trash cans, and that will actually close them down. So you'll see this time now, if I click the trash can and then come back up to reopen my terminal, you can see that now it opens a brand new terminal since I trashed the old one. Another thing that we can do inside of Visual Studio Code is take advantage of the search bar. So up here at the top, if I click on this will allow me to search all of my files by name. So for example, if I wanted to open my about file, I can just start typing about. There it is, it shows up right there. You can hit enter or click on it, and it will open that file in Visual Studio Code. So this is pretty cool. So rather than navigating around and trying to find your file, if you know what the file is called, so if I want to edit my index, I can go up here, just start typing index, and go ahead and open my index file. Another thing we can do rather than click on the bar is use Command P, and that will go ahead and open up the panel. And let's just say this time I want to open up links.html. Looks like this file's empty since I created it within this video. Now this search bar up here at the top actually functions as more than one thing. Initially, this go to file, this is the search bar that I opened, so I can type in the different file names. But if you notice, there's other options in here as well. So it actually says show and run commands. So I can actually show and run different commands inside of Visual Studio Code one of which we already saw. So when we added the code command to the path, we actually used the command palette to do that. So if I open up the command palette, you can see I can click show and run commands, or there's a keyboard shortcut, which is Shift Command P, or if you're on Windows, it's going to be Shift Control P. Same thing with the go to file. Instead of Command P, it's going to be Control P. So to run a command, you can go ahead and click on that. And you can see there's all kinds of different commands that I can run in here. These are all the ones that come from VS Code out of the box. But as you add additional functionality, additional extensions, things like that, you'll have even more commands that you can run inside of this command palette. All right, so just to show an example here, I can go ahead and click into here, click show and run commands. And then let's say if I wanted to open a terminal, I can say terminal, and there's a bunch of different things in here. But you can see here is create a new terminal. I'll go ahead and click on that. And you can see that that command went ahead and opened the terminal here inside of Visual Studio Code. So we could use the keyboard shortcut to do it. We can use the file menu to do it, or we can use this command palette to do it. And the command palette can do a whole bunch of other things. We can have it format our code for us. There's too many to list and too many to talk about, but really anything that you can do in the UI or one of the menus, you can pretty much do inside of the command palette. So very powerful tool, and even more powerful when you start adding extensions to Visual Studio Code. All right, so the last thing that we want to look at is the settings. So if I go up to the code menu and click on settings, and then click on settings, this will open all of the various settings for Visual Studio Code. And very similar to how we looked at the command palette and the file search, inside of here, we can actually search through the settings using this toolbar up here, but you can see it shows us the most commonly used. So let's say we want to auto save our files. So that way, as we're working, it just continuously saves our files. We can turn auto save on. So there's a couple different options to do that. I can just do after delay. I can change the font size if I want to. I can change the font family. I can change the editor tab size. So when I hit tab, it's going to go 4 spaces by default. If I wanted to change that, I could. So you can see this is where all of the settings for Visual Studio Code are housed. And these settings, you can either have them take place at the user level. So basically it's going to apply to any project that you open. So any folder that you open in Visual Studio Code, these settings will take effect unless there's something else that's overriding them. So for each folder, that folder is essentially called a workspace. And in the workspace, you can actually overwrite the global user settings if you want to. So for example, if I changed, let's go back up to the top, and if I click commonly used, and let's just say for my workspace, I want to have no autosave for my Visual Studio Code. However, for this workspace, I do want autosave on. Okay, so any new projects that I create in Visual Studio Code will not have autosave unless I turn it on for that workspace. And so that's exactly what's happening here. So now if I go back to my files, and let's just say I start making a change, and we'll just add a H1, say this is the links page. All right, and this file has already been saved for me. So you can see that little dot up there is gone. And basically as I type, it automatically saves the file, and I do not have to worry about saving this anymore, which is pretty neat. Might not be what you want, but for some developers, they find that super, super helpful. So Visual Studio Code is all about giving you the flexibility to work with code in the way that works for you. And there's a ton of extensions and a ton of options inside of Visual Studio Code to really customize it for your own development workflow. All right, well, that's pretty much going to go ahead and do it for this video. Thank you so much for coding along with me today. If you like what you saw and found this information valuable, please leave me a like down below. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing. We're going to be exploring Visual Studio Code in a little bit more detail, along with learning a whole lot about web development. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, please consider subscribing for more videos just like this one. All right, well, I really hope you learned something today, and if not, I at least hope that you were mildly entertained. So until next time, be sure to stay curious, never stop learning, and I will see you all in the next video.